The afterlife's beliefs was a social practice that tied all of Egyptian society together, therefore can be viewed as important for its structure and cohesion. To start off with the understanding of how they perceived and treated death, we can examine a concept that's directly related to this, the concept of time, which in ancient Egypt was seen as fluid. For them this was both linear and cyclical, linear in the sense of their mortal lives, birth and death, cyclical by the observed patterns around them. This would be the annual flooding, astronomical patterns, and solar patterns. For them they would experience rebirth in the afterlife. This can be seen as cyclical also. This manner of functioning, this consistency, allowed for the universe to exist in a stable state and flourish. The statue was completely sealed off. There are 2 holes located on the wall. The holes at first glance doesn't seem to have any purpose, though it's later revealed that these holes are for the statue to have a perception of the North Star. This holds interest since the North Star just rotates around the horizon, never going beneath it, unlike the sun. The North Star comes to symbolize the afterlife, comes to symbolize immortality. Underworld is ruled by Osiris. He is the judge of the dead, he is the king of the dead. But once he ruled above before being betrayed by his own brother Set, after he conceived Anubis with Set's wife Nephthys. He's also the embodiment of hope after death, and therefore he becomes associated with the cycle observed in nature, such as agriculture and the Nile. Furthermore, the kings of Egypt, the pharaohs embody Horus while they're alive, his son, and once they have died they're associated with Osiris. An important source of Egypt's concept of death is the Book of the Dead. By the time this book was written, everybody had the possibility of entering into the afterlife. This book is the quintessential source in understanding Egyptian mythology. Here we have a room depicted, Osiris on the throne, Anubis leading the deceased individual. Thoth, god of knowledge, is ready to write down. He was seen as a skilled deity called the scribe to the gods, and is associated with the bird ibis. A scale which will be used to weigh the individual's heart is present. If the individual's heart weighs more than a feather, he will be devoured by a creature known as Ammit, composed of Egypt's most feared animals, the legs of a hippopotamus, the body of a lion, and the head of a crocodile. If successful, one could pass to paradise, which came in the form of a field of reeds for the ancient Egyptians. The god Anubis was viewed as the right-hand man of Osiris. He was the one that conducted the dead. He was also seen as the one who invented mummification, when reviving the god Osiris from the dead after he had been torn to pieces by Set. The mummification practice was essential for the body to be preserved in order for the deceased to reach the afterlife. Therefore, priests often would wear jackal heads during preparation of the body. Anubis was associated with the jackal. One of the reasons was that jackals would scavenge for buried bodies. The desecration of a dead body was a fate seen worse than death itself. The god emerged as a way to ensure protection from deterioration. The god was also carved and painted on tombs to intimidate and ward off grave robbers. The body went through a process which consisted of removing the organs except for the heart, placing them in jars. Salt was then placed on the body to remove all moisture. After a few days the body would be perfumed and thick layers of resin were applied. To glue the bandages, the process of layering bandages would be repeated. The organs that are placed in the jars are each respectively guarded by the 4 sons of Horus, with each being associated with a compass point. We have the baboon-headed god, god of the north and protector of the lungs. We have the jackal-headed god, god of the east and protector of the stomach. We have god of the south and protector of the liver. And lastly we have the falcon-headed god, god of the west and protector of the intestines. Beliefs of the afterlife consisted in a system where we have the ka, the vital essence of a person, the element which makes them alive. Death is viewed as the ka leaving the body. We then have the ba. It can be viewed as what makes the individual unique, the person's personality. Believed to remain after death, it is sometimes depicted as a human-headed bird, flying out into the afterlife to join with the ka. Egyptian concept of the afterlife can be understood by looking at the measures they took to adhere to their ideas. A masaba was the house of the dead, viewed as the internal house, built using mud brick, but the most important were made out of stone, creating a sense of permanency. That these buildings were labor-intensive, all of this to achieve a successful transition from one life to another, to have an afterlife which provides all the luxuries that one enjoyed in the mortal world. The buildings emerged in the pre-dynastic period, 3100 BC, and continued into the Old Kingdom. The masaba was composed of a chapel, a room with a statue of the ka, and the underground burial chambers. The chapel of the masaba had a false door that was located there. It was viewed as a sort of portal between the mortal world and the afterlife, which the spirit of the dead could utilize freely. It usually was the point of focus of the chapel, where offerings were made to the deceased for his or her continued existence into the afterlife. In the offering room, we have an image of the deceased, sometimes enjoying items that would have been placed in the tombs. Many times we have reeds representing the Egyptian eternal life. There was another room that was inaccessible called the Serdab, which was where precious items, clothes, and anything else considered essential for the deceased to enjoy in the afterlife. A statue was located in the room, representing a place for the person's ba or soul to reside in. Openings were present in the room for allowing the ba to enter and exit freely. Deep in the ground was where the actual burial was located. Ba statues function as a stand-in for the body. We can observe that the artist tries to capture the individual's likeness, makes it naturalistic. In this tomb, in the Valley of the Kings, we have a pyramid split open like a gate that leads to the afterlife. We have a son being carried by a scarab beetle. We have the god Khnum shown riding into the afterlife, where he will experience rebirth, this idea that the afterlife is always present. Though a large part of what remains of Egyptian art and civilization in general is in some way related to death, it does not mean we don't have remnants that differ in nature. We had satirical papyri. In this instance, we can observe a lion gazelle playing a game, with the gazelle's life on the line. Finally, we can say Egypt, a civilization that was obsessed with death and the promise of an afterlife, something we ourselves often ponder about, the inevitable end, where we have to face our mortality. This is how they decided to perceive and act upon death.